The fall before the truth. They say betrayal hurts most when it comes from the people you die for. But what they don't tell you is that it can also set you free. My name is Hannah Cooper, and for most of my adult life, I believed that family came before everything. Before sleep, before dreams, before myself. When my dad got sick, I worked double shifts. When my mom lost her job, I took out a loan. When my little brother, Eli, wanted to go to college, I signed the checks without hesitation, every single semester. For 15 years, I carried us all. I told myself that this was love. That my exhaustion meant I was doing something right. That one day, it would all balance out, that they'd stand by me, just as I had stood by them. But life has a way of showing you who's really holding your hand. And who's quietly holding the knife. When everything fell apart, it happened fast. I was the senior project manager at an energy firm, 12 years of grinding, working late, cleaning up other people's mistakes, and saying yes when no one else would. Then one morning, HR called me in. They said there had been irregularities in my department's reports. False expense claims. Missing vendor invoices. All tied to my employee ID. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Then they showed me the documents. My name. My digital signature. The transactions. And worst of all, the funds had been redirected to an account that partially matched my home address. I remember the taste of copper in my mouth when they escorted me out. No final meeting. No explanation. No paycheck. Just a box of things from my desk and a reputation left bleeding behind me. Before I tell you how deep this betrayal went, hit subscribe. Because sometimes, the hardest stories to hear are the ones we all need to learn from. In the days that followed, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters. Old coworkers. Even extended family members who'd heard something and wanted the gossip straight from the source. But my family, the people I'd built my life around, stayed eerily silent. No calls from Mom. No messages from Eli. It wasn't until the third day that I heard from him. A single text. Hang in there, sis. Things will work out. That was it. No visit. No call. Just 12 words that sounded like pity from someone I had once fed, clothed, and pushed toward his future. Weeks went by. I sold my car to cover legal fees. I withdrew my savings to keep the mortgage afloat. And still, no word from my family. Until one night, my best friend Rachel showed up at my door, laptop in hand, eyes wide with something between fury and disbelief. "Hannah," she said, "you need to see this." She turned the screen toward me, an online business registry for a tech consulting startup. The founder's name jumped out at me like a ghost from my own reflection. Eli Cooper. And below that, the listed financial officer was the same contractor account that had been flagged in my company's investigation. I felt the world tilt sideways. My little brother, the one I'd paid tuition for, the one I'd fed, driven to interviews, encouraged through every setback, had stolen from me. He'd rerouted company funds through a shell account in my name to launch his startup. He had used me as his shield. And when the walls closed in, he'd let me burn quietly, hoping no one would ever connect the dots. I remember whispering, "No. No, he wouldn't." But the evidence was staring back, undeniable. Rachel's voice trembled. "He's not just connected to the transfers. The timing matches perfectly. Every error in your department started 2 months before his company registered." I sank to the floor. The room spun. Every sacrifice, every hour I'd spent building his future, came crashing down in the space of one Google. There's a special kind of silence that follows betrayal. The kind that's not made of shock, but realization. The realization that love, when given blindly, can become a weapon. The next day, I drove to Mom's house. When she opened the door, her expression wasn't relief, it was discomfort. "Oh, Hannah," she sighed, "this is such a mess." Mom, I said, my voice shaking. You knew? She looked away. Eli told me everything. He said you were okay with it. That you offered to help him get started, even if it meant bending some rules. It felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. He said what? Her eyes darted around, desperate to avoid mine. You've always been the strong one. The practical one. We just thought. We? I repeated, my voice rising. You knew and you said nothing? Her silence was answer enough. That night, I sat in my car outside their house for hours. Watching the lights flicker behind the curtains, hearing muffled laughter through the window. The family I'd spent my life holding together had already replaced me with a story that made them comfortable. To them, I wasn't the victim. I was the problem solved. But here's the thing about truth. It doesn't stay buried forever. And when it finally came out, it didn't just clear my name. It destroyed everything Eli built. The proof and the public fall. The worst thing about betrayal isn't what they take from you. It's what they make you question. Your worth, your sanity, your own memory. The night I learned the truth, sleep became a stranger. Every thought raced in circles, memories of Eli laughing, of me signing his checks, of every word I'd said to defend him when others doubted his drive. Now, every act of kindness I'd given him looked like a thread in the web he'd spun around me. But grief only lasts until resolve takes its place. And the next morning, when I woke up, I was done crying. It was time to get proof. I called Rachel. She was already ahead of me. I'd been going through his company's public filings, she said. You're not going to like what I found. She sent over a folder full of financial records, payroll reports, and transfer histories. The amounts matched every suspicious transaction that had gotten me fired. The same routing number. The same transfer dates. And, the final blow, the same shell account that HR had tied to me. Eli hadn't even bothered to change the details. He'd simply assumed I'd take the blame and disappear quietly. He had underestimated the woman who had built everything from nothing. You can steal money. You can steal credit. But when you steal from someone who built you, eventually, the foundation you stand on will crack. Over the next few weeks, I built my case carefully. Rachel introduced me to a forensic accountant she trusted, Maya, a sharp, unshakable woman who believed in justice more than sympathy. She combed through every record, creating a digital timeline that showed the flow of money from my company's accounts to Eli's startup. She even traced how he'd used fake invoices from consulting vendors, names he'd pulled from old emails I'd sent him during his job hunts. Maya looked up from her laptop one afternoon and said quietly, "This isn't amateur work. He planned this for months." It felt like a knife. But under the pain, a calm resolve settled in. If he could build this web, then I could untangle it, piece by piece. When the case was ready, I sent a formal statement to the firm's legal department, with every document attached. At first, they were cautious. Then, when they verified the evidence, their tone shifted. My former boss called me personally. "Hannah, we're so sorry," he said. "We had no idea." He explained that internal security was already pursuing charges, and they wanted me to come back, not as an employee, but as a consultant to help improve fraud detection systems. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd lost everything because of someone else's greed, and now, I'd be paid to prevent others from suffering the same fate. But this wasn't about the job anymore. It was about the truth. And the truth deserved light. Before you hear how I faced my brother, subscribe. Because sometimes, the only way to rise again is to stand in the very fire that burned you. The day I confronted him, I didn't plan a grand showdown. It was a Sunday, his birthday. Mom was hosting a small gathering at her house. I showed up unannounced. When I walked in, conversation stopped. Eli froze mid-sentence, a smile still half-formed. Mom's eyes widened, then darted toward the door. "Hannah," she said softly, "I didn't think you'd come." I looked at her, not unkindly, but firmly. I didn't come for cake. I turned to Eli. We need to talk. He forced a nervous laugh. About what? About how you used my company credentials to fund your startup, I said. And how you let me take the fall for it. Gasps filled the room. He tried to recover, muttering, "That's ridiculous." I cut him off and pulled out a folder from my bag. Inside were printed transaction logs, screenshots, and copies of his own filings, all neatly highlighted. Mom whispered, "Eli, what is this?" He stared at the papers, then at me, his composure cracking. "Hannah, please," he said under his breath. "Not here." "Here is exactly where," I replied. "Because I spent years carrying you. I sold my car for Dad's medical bills. I worked nights so you could have a future. And you repaid me by stealing my name." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth. The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, all underscoring the sound of my brother's empire cracking. Mom sank into a chair. "Eli, tell me she's wrong." He couldn't. Instead, he whispered, "I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just needed startup money, and you always had things handled." "You always assumed I'd handle it," I said. "You built your success on my exhaustion." Some betrayals are crimes. Others are lessons. But both have consequences. I walked out that day with my head high, not because I'd humiliated him, but because I'd finally stopped hiding the truth. The next week, news broke that Eli's company was under investigation. Investors pulled out. His name, once tied to glowing startup articles, was now buried under headlines about fraud and misrepresentation. He called me once, a voicemail I never answered. All he said was, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this." He was right. I didn't. But hearing it still didn't fix what had been lost. When the dust settled, I realized something. I hadn't just been betrayed, I'd been tested. And surviving that test meant I could finally build something that couldn't be taken from me again. Rebuilding from the ashes. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering, without letting the memory break you again. Rebuilding from the ashes. When the people you save turn on you, the only salvage left is the life you rebuild for yourself. The months that followed were quiet, not the peaceful kind, but the kind where you hear the small, honest sounds of work, the clack of a keyboard, the ring of a customer call, the scent of coffee as you force yourself out of bed and start again. I took the consulting gig they offered me, short-term, focused on strengthening internal controls and preventing fraud. It was bitterly ironic, getting paid to repair the very system that had been used as a ladder to hurt me, but it was also the only place that made sense. I knew how the cracks formed. I knew how to seal them. At first, returning to the workplace in any capacity felt like becoming a ghost among colleagues who had watched my dismissal and then looked away. Some offered awkward smiles. Others avoided eye contact. It stung less than I expected. The sting had been replaced by something quieter, purpose. I poured myself into the work. Long hours of forensic reviews, process redesigns, and staff training. I wrote playbooks for expense approvals and spearheaded a vendor verification protocol that would make it much harder for a fraudulent shell to hide in plain sight. The company listened, because the evidence was in black and white, and because senior leadership understood that reputational risk was expensive. One afternoon, Maya, the forensic accountant who had helped me, stopped by my temporary desk with a paper cup and a grin. "You turned their mess into a model," she said. "They're actually rolling your system company-wide." I allowed myself a small smile. Feelings of vindication flared, but quickly cooled into something steadier. This was not about triumph over Eli. It was about making sure no one else got burned the way I had. Outside work, my life was rebuilding in ways that weren't as neat as spreadsheets. I sold the tiny apartment I'd held onto and moved into a modest townhouse closer to the city, a place where light actually came in the windows. The extra commute hours I'd once spent fretting became hours for therapy, for small dinners with friends, for a book before bed. Rachel checked in more than usual, bringing casseroles and a kind of practical tenderness that made the ache less lonely. The legal process against Eli began to unfold on public timelines. Investors pulled funds. The company dissolved. He faced civil suits and, later, criminal charges. I didn't savor any of it. Seeing his name in legal filings felt surreal. The boy who'd begged for help, the kid I'd driven to interviews, now reduced to legal citations. Sometimes I woke in the night and wondered how someone I loved could become such a careful architect of my ruin. Then, one morning that felt ordinary in every way, an email landed in my inbox that changed the trajectory of everything. The subject line read, "Request for Speaker, Community Fraud Conference." The sender was a nonprofit that worked with small businesses to prevent theft and embezzlement. They'd heard about the systems I'd put in place and asked if I would lead a workshop. I hesitated only a second before answering yes. Standing at that lectern for the first time felt like stepping out into sunlight after a long winter. I spoke about the mechanics of fraud, the red flags, the approvals that mattered, the human stories behind the numbers. But what I found myself talking about most, unexpectedly, was trust. How trust, unmonitored, becomes a lever. How the people you die for can be the ones who use you as a bridge to their own dreams. The audience was rapt. Small business owners asked practical questions. One woman wept openly as she told a story of a trusted manager who'd vanished with months of revenue. When the session ended, several people approached to say thank you in ways that made my chest ache with a new kind of pride. One of the attendees was a representative from a national foundation that funded anti-fraud solutions for nonprofits. She pulled me aside and said, "Hannah, we need someone like you on our advisory board. You know both sides, how the damage happens and how to stop it. Would you consider joining?" Her request felt like validation, not revenge. It felt like the work I'd done in pain might now protect others. I accepted. That role opened doors. I traveled to small towns I'd only read about. I trained shop owners to install two-step verifications. I taught NGOs how to audit donor flows. The work was practical, messy, and meaningful. For the first time since the firing, I felt that the years of supporting my family had not been wasted. They had taught me something useful: resilience, diligence, and a refusal to be erased. If you believe recovery is work, not a moment, subscribe. Because rebuilding takes patience and purpose. Months passed. Eli's legal battle stretched on. At times I was tempted to avoid the family entirely, to let them reel in shame and figure things out without my presence. But some core relationships are stubborn, and grief, for what was and what could have been, persisted. Mom called more often now, asking practical questions about lawyers and credit repair. Dad, constrained by pride, texted sporadically but stopped by my new place once with an awkward casserole and a contrite gaze. One evening, as autumn rain painted the city, I received a message I didn't expect. Eli wanted to meet. The text was short. "Can we talk? I need to explain. Please." A week earlier I might have blocked the number. Now, rehearsed and stronger, I agreed to a coffee at a neutral cafe. He arrived looking smaller than his social media persona, hair unkempt, eyes hollowed by the pressure of consequence. He sat without pretense. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "I don't expect forgiveness. I need to tell you what happened." He spoke in staccato bursts. He hadn't planned the theft as a vendetta. He had told himself it was a shortcut, a way to bootstrap a company to attract legitimate investors. "I told myself I'd fix it," he said. "I told myself I'd pay back anything that went wrong." When I asked why he'd used my credentials, he swallowed. "Because you were always the one who had the answers. I thought if people saw my association with you, doors would open. I never meant for it to ruin you." Listening to him was like watching someone confess a slow-motion collapse. There was remorse, yes, but also the rawness of someone learning adulthood the hardest possible way. He didn't ask for money or favors. He asked only that I listen and know he was trying, imperfectly, to become accountable. I didn't hug him. I didn't yell. I asked him one question instead: why didn't you come to me before you did any of this? His answer was painful and simple: fear. Fear that I'd say no. Fear that I'd see him as less. Fear that he'd never be enough without stealing my scaffolding. Hearing that cut deeper than any legal judgment. For years I had shielded him from fear. Here it was turned inward and weaponized. I told him what I'd learned in the months since, that saving someone isn't the same as enabling them. I helped you, I said, but helping is not above accountability. He nodded, acceptance settling like dust. I know. I'm working on it. I go to group therapy. I'm on a repayment plan to investors. I'm looking for honest work. He looked up with a small, tentative hope. I get that you might never forgive me. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. There's a strange mercy in letting someone tell the truth. It doesn't fix the past, but it clears the air so both people can breathe. I left the cafe with a kind of quiet I hadn't expected, not peace exactly, but the first step toward it. Rebuilding after betrayal isn't a grand gesture. It's a series of small, stubborn acts, showing up for the work, teaching what you learned, and letting time do its honest work. The reckoning and the quiet kind of freedom. Sometimes redemption doesn't come with applause. It arrives in whispers, long after the damage is done. The cafe meeting lingered in my mind for days afterward. I kept replaying his voice, that fragile confession of fear, fear of failure, fear of not being enough, fear of disappointing the sister who had once been his safety net. It didn't erase what he did, but it shifted the lens ever so slightly. He wasn't a monster. He was a broken man who'd built a castle on my back and then watched it collapse. But understanding isn't the same as forgiving. Forgiveness, I learned, is not an act of mercy for someone else, it's a declaration of independence for yourself. So I didn't rush it. I let it grow in the quiet. 6 months passed. In that time, Eli's company was officially dissolved. His name disappeared from the financial news feeds and investor sites that had once glorified his ambition. He moved back to our hometown and took an entry-level job at a logistics firm. I learned this not from him, but from Mom. She had begun reaching out again, her tone softened and remorseful. One evening, she invited me for dinner. I hesitated, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. Still, part of me wanted to see the house again, to sit at that table not as the scapegoat, but as the woman who had finally rewritten her place in the family story. When I arrived, the table was set simply. No forced celebration, no awkward laughter. Just the three of us, Mom, Dad, and me. Eli wasn't there. I sat down. The smell of pot roast filled the air, comforting and familiar. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mom said quietly, "Hannah, we failed you." It wasn't a grand speech. Just 4 words, but they cracked something open in me. "You believed him," I said. "You believed that I could steal, that I could lie." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I didn't want to. But he was so convincing, and you've always been the strong one. I thought you could handle anything." "That's exactly the problem," I replied. "You thought I could handle everything, even being betrayed by my own brother." The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was real. A silence that holds truth. Dad cleared his throat. "He's been coming by," he said. "Helping me fix the fence. He's not the same. He talks about you, you know. Says he doesn't deserve another chance, but hopes someday you'll visit." I didn't answer right away. Because deep down, I already knew I would, just not yet. Family isn't built on blood alone. It's built on accountability, on truth, on the willingness to face what we've broken. In the months that followed, I focused on building something that had no room for deceit. With support from the foundation board, I launched a program that trained women in corporate finance, not the glamorous kind, but the kind that keeps companies honest. We called it Project Integrity. The first workshop filled within days. There was something profoundly healing about standing in front of women, single mothers, fresh graduates, former victims of fraud, and telling them, you are allowed to protect yourselves. You are allowed to take up space in systems that once silenced you. I spoke with a steadiness I didn't recognize as pride, but as freedom. One afternoon, as I was preparing materials for a class, I saw an unfamiliar number flash across my phone. I almost ignored it, until I saw the name, Eli. This time, I answered. Hey, he said quietly. I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to let you know I've been volunteering at a youth business mentorship program. It's not much, but it feels good to help someone without taking something from them. I smiled, a real, unforced smile. That's good, Eli. I wanted to thank you, he said, for letting me hit rock bottom. I hated you for a while, but I see now that if you'd saved me again, I'd never have learned. I swallowed hard. You don't owe me thanks, I said softly. Just stay honest. That's all I ever wanted from you. There was a pause, a long one. Then he said, I miss having my sister. I'm still here, I replied. Just, on different terms. He didn't argue. He understood. And for the first time in years, our goodbye didn't carry the weight of anger. It carried something lighter, fragile, but real. If you've ever rebuilt yourself after the people you loved broke you, subscribe. Because sometimes, survival itself is the story. A year later, at a conference in Chicago, I stood backstage waiting to speak. The topic was ethics and emotional resilience in the workplace. As I glanced at the audience, my eyes caught a familiar face near the back. Eli. He looked older, steadier, sitting beside Mom and Dad. They weren't trying to make a scene, just showing up quietly to listen. As I spoke, I didn't reference him or my family by name. But when I said, sometimes, the hardest lesson is that forgiveness isn't a gift you give to others, it's the key that unlocks your own cage. I saw him lower his head. After the event, they waited by the exit. No grand speeches. No apologies rehearsed. Just open faces, awkward smiles, and one simple request from Mom. Dinner? This time, I said yes. I worked for years to support my family. Only to learn one of them had been undoing everything behind my back. But here's the truth. Betrayal didn't destroy me. It revealed what was real. I lost my job, my reputation, and my faith in family. Only to rebuild them all stronger, quieter, and honest. And when forgiveness finally came, it wasn't for them. It was for me. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes, our greatest heartbreaks are just the universe clearing space for a better kind of peace.